Well, it's time once again for our weekly podcast on the campaign trail with Tea Party Express, where every single week we talk with conservatives from across the country who are stepping forward to help Republicans keep the House majority and take back the Senate so we can start the process of rebuilding our country. And this week, we're traveling to Alabama's 6th congressional district, where 7 Republicans competed in the primary to fill the empty seat left by the retirement of incumbent Spencer Backus. And of those 7, 2 Republicans received the highest vote totals. They're going to face off in a runoff election on July the 15th. The winner almost certain to be elected in November in what some people are referring to as, quote, the reddest district in the country, unquote. So let's welcome one of the candidates now, joining us on the podcast, Gary Palmer. Gary, it's a pleasure to have you with me.
Thanks for having me on, Mark.
You bet. And Gary, I've got to ask you right from the get-go, what makes the Alabama 6th so red? And please don't tell me it's a Roll Tide thing.
Well, this race, I need the orange and blue and the crimson and white and green and gold and everything else I can get to vote for me. So what makes it so red are the people and their values. These are people who truly are conservative in their views on life and politics, and it's reflected in how they vote and how they live, and it really defines our culture.
Well, for folks that haven't heard much about Gary Palmer in the past, let me give you just a quick bio. For 24 years, Gary led the Alabama Policy Institute. It's a research and education organization who identifies, develops, and promotes very sound public policies and emphasizes limited government, free markets, rule of law, strong families. And Gary, I first became aware of you and your campaign reading National Review. Quinn Hillier, in an article there, said that your experience gives you, quote, not just unassailable credentials as a full-spectrum conservative, but also the policy chops, the procedural knowledge, and political skills to hit the Capitol ground sprinting as an advocate, legislator, and leader. And he also thinks that you're running in the most important U.S. House race in the country. Now, why do you think that he and a lot of other experts believe that to be true?
Well, because of what I bring to the table that honestly I don't know of another candidate in the country that has these credentials, and that is what you just mentioned, almost 25 years working on solving some of these problems, working at both the state and federal level. But the other thing is that back in 1992, I was on the founding board of a national network of state-based think tanks, the State Policy Network. And I really think that the key to getting our country back on the right track is changing it from the bottom up, not the top down. I don't think that we can change it from the top down because I don't think Washington can change Washington. And you look at all the big reforms that are taking place around the country at the moment, they're all at the state level. Right to work in Wisconsin, right to work in Michigan, the holding the line on the Medicaid expansion. All of these issues are being driven by these state-based think tanks. And I think what I bring to the table is not only as Quinn Hillier says, the policy chops, but the networking in all 50 states and the ability to drive the messaging from the bottom up.
And why do you think that this House race in particular is gathering so much attention? What makes it so important?
Well, because of that, people here have an opportunity to elect either a guy who's a 10-year legislator and he's really more in the politician genre, or someone who comes in unlike any other candidate in the country that has instant credibility once he gets to Washington, and credibility in every state. And one of the things that I've tried to get across to folks about why there's so much frustration with things in D.C. is that the messaging in D.C. is pretty much in a bubble. The national media defines the message up there. Consultants define the message up there. And I really believe there's a lot of confusion among folks as to what the American people really believe. And if you look at things at the local level, just like this broadcast that you're doing, there are far more people tuned into their local media, their local talk, than watch the national media. And that's where the messaging needs to be done, is at the local level.
And Gary, you brought up your opponent, Republican member of the Alabama House of Representatives, who, I'm guessing will say that he has similar positions as you on Obamacare, government debt, national security, and the like. Other than the fact that he's been in the establishment for a number of years, and you've been one of the policy folks who've really been working at the grassroots level, what's the biggest difference between you and the man you're running against?
Well, Paul's a nice guy, but I've made a public commitment that I will serve no more than 5 terms. I will, if I'm elected, I will come home after 10 years. But the other commitment that I've made is to not move there. I think that's a huge problem for people who serve in Congress, is that they move to Washington and they become part of the Washington culture. And they lose a substantial amount of connection to their district. I will fly up, I'll commute, I'll fly up on Tuesday morning and come home Thursday night or Friday morning. And while I'm doing that, I've made it a public commitment that I'm going to host a breakfast and invite people to come who may be interested in running for office one day. I want to have an opportunity to lead kind of a class to teach people these founding principles and how to apply them to issues, and with the idea that there'll be people come out of there that run for the legislature, run for city council, and one of them hopefully will take my place. And Mark, I think there's a huge problem that we've got in the country, is that we have failed to develop leaders. And we really need to start developing farm teams in every state, from which we'll draw our state legislators, we'll draw members of Congress, eventually governors, and eventually presidents. But to do that, you have to be intentional, and you have to be strategic in it, and we just haven't done that.
We're talking with Gary Palmer, candidate for Congress in Alabama's 6th Congressional District. Gary, on your website, you say that it's time to change direction, that our nation desperately needs leaders who are willing to stand up, make the tough choices. What hope do you see in America's future that tells you that it's not too late to get us back on the right course?
Well, first of all, I think the people, there's just almost in our bloodstream this reverence for the Constitution, and I think it's still there. But from just an economic perspective, America can be the world's energy superpower. We've got enormous energy resources. I had a meeting in Congress a few years ago with several members of Congress, and I went in to see one of them. It was right before the first high-profile vote on raising the debt limit. And he asked if I was there to talk with him about that. And I had one of my colleagues from the Alabama Policy Institute with me, and I said, well, we are. He said, well, do you have $1.5 trillion? Which I thought was rather condescending. I said, no, but you do. He gave me a funny look, and I said, have you ever heard of the Green River Formation? And he shook his head no, and I said, it's in western Colorado, southwestern Wyoming, and northern Utah, and according to the Bureau of Land Management, it holds 1.5 trillion barrels of recoverable oil. I said, that's 3 times the known reserves of the Saudis. I said, we've got 280 trillion cubic feet of proven natural gas reserves and enough coal to last us for almost 250 years. I said, we're not broke, we're stupid. Since that time, those estimates have been upgraded. Green River is now estimated to hold 3 trillion barrels of recoverable oil. And I want to emphasize to your listeners, that's just one formation. And 3 trillion barrels of oil is 3 times what the world's used in the last 100 years. The estimate on the federal royalties that I've seen show that the royalties alone are worth $14 trillion. I've heard of, there's another report came out last week that said that if we'll open up these resources by 2015, we will lead the world in oil production. And we're already leading the world in natural gas production. And my point is that if we open up our energy resources, it will jumpstart our economy, and we can dominate the world economy for another decade or two. So I believe we can get that fiscal card out of the ditch. I'm honest about it. I think it's going to take 20 to 25 years, but there is a way back, Mark, and there's a window of opportunity, and we need to act before that window closes.
Gary, one of the questions that we ask all of our candidates here on the campaign trail with Tea Party Express is talking about a time when you stood up for something you knew was right, something you believed in, that you knew there would also be consequences. Now, I also know that you got a reputation for standing up to the Republican establishment there in Alabama. So if you would, just pick one that you could maybe give to us right now that would be an example for everybody listening to the podcast right now about the courage of your convictions.
Well, in 2003, Governor Bob Riley, who is a dear friend of mine, by the way, came into office and was faced with a major fiscal crisis in state government, and some folks convinced him to introduce a massive tax increase, $1.2 billion tax increase. And I opposed him on it. And there were some folks who were aligned with him that had always supported my institute, and in one case it cost us a $50,000 donor. That it was the right thing to do. I knew that we did not have to have a massive tax increase to work our way out of that, and it was defeated, I think, 67-33, 68-32, something like that. And it forced the state to work its way out. And I've done the same thing with Governor Bentley. Opposed him on tapping into the state's trust fund, our oil and gas royalty trust fund, that bails the state out. I'm on his commission for improving state government, and I've identified over $200 million in savings. We lost that battle, but in the process, because we took a stand on it, they committed to introducing a bill that established a clear schedule of repayment for that, and it was the first bill they passed in the next session, and they've already paid it back. So we've had an impact. And one of my favorite quotes is from Senator Tom Coburn when he was in the House of Representatives, and he said that the greatest deficit in Congress is a deficit of courage, of moral courage, and by that he meant courage to cast a vote that would send you home. That's what we need, 435 men and women that would have that kind of courage.
Well, Gary, it's interesting you bring that particular quote up because it leads into a question that I had regarding our foreign policy right now and the situation in Iraq. From where you stand right now, have we been handling the situation with these militants who are rapidly descending on what looks like Baghdad any moment right now? How do you feel we're doing? And if you were in Congress right now, what kind of leadership would you be providing in order for the U.S. to take the right direction?
Well, it's a disaster, Mark, and I frankly disagreed with the Bush administration. I'm never going to second guess them for going in because they thought there were weapons of mass destruction. That's the kind of Monday morning quarterbacking that I really don't think we can afford to do. If the intelligence indicated that they were there, I think they had a responsibility to go in. My problem is that they went in with the idea of nation building, and I think we would have been far better off to remove the regime and let the rest of the governmental infrastructure in place and let them work out their differences. I don't think we would see what we're seeing right now. But that's as they say, hindsight's 20/20. How did we get where we are now? I think this administration has been an absolute abject failure in foreign policy, and it crosses a lot of lines. First of all, these people apparently believe that we live in a rational world. In a rational world, people leave everybody else alone, but obviously it's not rational. You got the Chinese now flexing their muscle in the South China Sea. You've got this situation in Iraq. You've got the situation in Syria. You've got the Russians in Ukraine. Our enemies do not respect us. They do not fear us, at least this administration. But that doesn't mean we ought to have boots on the ground in any of these conflicts. I think we could have helped Ukraine. We could have helped Iraq with intelligence. And I think the news that's coming out now indicates there was a massive intelligence failure in Iraq. But there's also other ways that we could have impacted this situation, and it goes back to the energy resources that I talked about. If we opened up if we started exporting oil to the rest of the world with the amounts that we have, And along with liquefied natural gas, I don't think the Russians would have ever been in Europe. The Europeans wouldn't be held hostage over energy by the Russians. I think we'd make OPEC basically irrelevant in this. And I think it would change the dynamic substantially. The Russians have used their energy revenues to rebuild and modernize their army. I think that there's a lot of ways to have impacted this, and I think largely avoided what we're seeing right now, frankly, all around the world.
Gary, one of the other things that I wanted to talk about as far as what's in the headlines here recently, what are you reading from the folks that you're talking to as you travel through Alabama in the tea leaves over the Tea Party's victory in Virginia? They got Eric Cantor tossed to the primary. Do they see that as a resurgence of grassroots efforts to kind of take back Congress, or was it just a one-time thing?
I think it's a combination of things, Mark. I think what's happening in Mississippi may be more important to the Tea Party movement than the Cantor defeat, and here's why. One, it turns out that Cantor hadn't been had a town hall meeting in his district over 500-something days. I think that there was a substantial amount of arrogance on his part, and it goes back to not moving to D.C. He lost touch with his constituents. I also think the immigration issue was a part of that. And I do think that the fact that in a low turnout election, groups like the Tea Party groups and other conservative groups can win a lot of elections, which brings me to my third point about this is how low the turnout was. I think in that district there's about maybe 750,000 people live there. There's probably between 450 and 500,000 people eligible to vote, but only about 70,000 people voted. And this is one of my big concerns as a conservative, and particularly for the Republican Party, is I think we've become experts at depressing people. We constantly talk about how bad everything is and blame it on Obama and Pelosi and Reid, and obviously there's a lot of bad going on and a lot to blame on them. But we've got to start talking to people about how we turn this thing around. And, I don't want to get into the hope and change theme that Obama had, but Mark, we have got to give people hope. We've got to encourage them. We've got to give people a reason to get involved in fight, because if they think the ship's sinking and it can't be saved, they're not interested in simply rearranging the deck chairs. People want to be a part of something that will make a difference, and we've got to convince them of that. I think that was part of Cantor's loss as well.
Gary, that's certainly well put. And, we're getting toward the end of our podcast here. A question that we wrap things up with each and every candidate is something that I think you've already kind of pretty much answered, but I'll let you put a final wrap on our conversation here by asking, why should Tea Party members listening to the podcast right now support your campaign for Congress?
I think I represent what a lot of people are looking for in Congress, and one of them, and it's fundamentally this: I am principle-driven. I'm going to stand firm on our principles. I'm solution-oriented, and I really do believe that we can get our country back on track. And I've told people this, and I've said it publicly. I think it's immoral for us to give up on a nation that has given us so much, that there have been so many sacrifices made for us that, frankly, we can't give it up. And it's interesting that this is the 50-year anniversary of Reagan's signature speech, A Time for Choosing. And then in that speech, he made the point that that this election is really about whether or not we believe in our capacity for self-government, or whether or not we abandon the American Revolution and concede that a little intellectual elite and a far-off capital can plan our lives better for us than we can plan them for ourselves. He ended that speech by talking about we would either be the generation that preserved for our children the last best hope of man on earth, or we would condemn them to 1,000 years of darkness. I frankly think that we're going to see a great awakening in this country and a real return to those founding principles. and I want to be a part of that.
Well, Gary Palmer, it's a pleasure to get the chance to talk with you. And for those folks that would like to know more about you, would like to help support your campaign, or just kind of keep an eye on what's going on as you get closer toward that runoff on the 15th of July, what's the website and where can they find you on social media?
Mark, our website is Palmer for Alabama, and all the links to our social media can be found there.
Well, that's awesome. And again, it's a real pleasure to talk to Gary Palmer, again running in Alabama's 6th Congressional District on the campaign trail with Tea Party Express. And our podcasts are always easy to find. First of all, you can subscribe on our RSS feeds for your Android phone, on iTunes for your iPhones. And if you want to go to the website, just check out www.teapartyexpress.org.